the role of Japa Yoga. The role, does it have a part in our spiritual life? Yes, certainly. But let us understand what it is. Japa is chanting. So, some people take the beads, it is there in all the religions where you count the beads, you do the japa with your beads. And what is it? It is nothing but the repetition of the Lord's name, whichever Lord you believe in. It could be Rama or Krishna, it could be Narayana, it could be Brahman, it could be Om, whatever you are inspired by, and you repeat the name of the Lord. And this is given as one of the methods of spiritual growth. Like all methods to do something, each thing has its placement. So, let us try and understand what is the placement of Japa Yoga. The current situation is, for most people, is their mind is full of desires. Since their mind is full of desires, their mind is running from one desire to the other desire. In this scenario, you cannot bring that mind and say, chant the name of the Lord. It won't, it will go here and there, it will go wherever its desires are. So, to bring ourselves to the state where we can do japa, first we must reduce the bulk of desires. We do that by the 3 parts of karma yoga, which means use the body to reduce desires, which means we work for a higher unselfish cause. Or secondly, use the path of bhakti yoga, that means use your emotions to reduce desires, that means you have developed better, nobler, finer emotions and direct them to the higher. Or you use jnana yoga, where you use your thinking, your discrimination to reduce desires, and through these 3 processes the bulk of desires comes down. But when we talk about the bulk of desires coming down, what has happened is we have created the desire for the self, we have created the desire for the higher. Japa yoga comes into necessity because we have created the desire for the higher. To realize the self, as you know, all desires have to go. A human minus desires is equal to God. So, all desires have to go if we have to gain God realization, self realization. But what have we done in our spiritual path? We have got rid of all the desires, but by repeating the thought of God, repeating the thought of the self, we have created a strong and ardent desire for the self. You got rid of all the other thoughts by thinking about the self. How will you get rid of the self? How will you get rid of the thought of the self now? You cannot realize the self if you have the thought of the self. It works exactly like this. At night when we want to sleep, we do so many things. We switch off the light, we put our head on the pillow, we pull our blankets, we do so many things. We do all these things because we have the desire to go to sleep. But we will sleep only if we drop the desire. If we hold on to the desire of sleeping, we will not be able to sleep. So, when we have done the various things and we have concentrated on the one desire to sleep, what we do after that is we drop that desire to sleep, and the result is of course that we sleep. Similarly, in the spiritual path, everything you do to create the desire for God, to create the desire for the self. But if you want to get the self, even that desire will have to go. So, what do? When we are at this particular stage of spiritual growth, that we have mainly just the desire to realize the self, that is the stage where Japa Yoga becomes necessary for us, vital for us. What we are going to do with this desire for the self is, we are going to chant it, Om, 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 and allow the chant to fade off into whispers. into silence. And in that silence, the self will stand revealed. So, we practice Japa Yoga in that stage of spiritual growth, between the dropping of most desires and a highly elevated desire for the self and the self itself. So, Japa Yoga is the penultimate stage on the journey, where you have just that one thought, you are chanting that one thought, you allow the chant to fade into whispers, and the silence that remains will eventually be the pure self, the pure consciousness. There is nothing else. So, Japa is used in the spiritual path to get rid of the desire for God. Hence, it is the last thing that we do on the spiritual path. In the earlier portion of the journey, in fact, in 99% of the journey, what we are doing is creating the desire for God. And the reason we are creating the desire for God is to get rid of all the other desires. Japa will help us get rid of that last desire. So, it is the penultimate thing on the spiritual path. Through Japa, we eradicate, we crush that desire, and what remains is just pure consciousness.